Hello everyone. Welcome to this month's speaker series hosted by the Mars Robotics Association. We're based in Mars, PA, and have FIRST robotics teams for grades 4 through 12. This month, our speaker is Chris Calhoun. Chris is a professor and coordinator of the Parks and Recreation Management Program at Butler County Community College in Butler, PA. He is also the lead water rescue instructor and trainer for the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, and coordinates and writes the curriculum for Pennsylvania's water rescue program. Additionally, he is a rescue technician on the Pennsylvania Helicopter Aquatic Rescue Team, or PA-HART, and Butler County Water Rescue Team 300. Throughout his career, Chris has received the Higgins and Langley Swiftwater Rescue Program Development Award 3 times, the Governor's Innovator Award, and the Regional and Appreciation Awards from the National Water Safety Congress for contributions to water safety and drowning prevention programs. Okay, welcome to Mars, Mr. Calhoun. How are you doing today?
I'm doing outstanding, Owen. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and I look forward to our conversation. Excuse me.
So, as I understand it, you have a presentation for us, and I'm going to kind of go through that, and then at the end, we'll have some questions for you. So for those who are watching this live, you can submit questions using the link in the description, and Mr. Calhoun will answer them at the end of the show. So let's get into the presentation.
Sounds good. Okay, Owen, I'd like to start off talking a little bit about water rescue. And water rescue is something that not a lot of people really think about, but it's something that almost everyone at some point in their life may become involved in. You may or may not know, but the #1 natural disaster in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is water-related emergencies from flooding. And if you are from the Western Pennsylvania area, you are very keen to the fact that Western Pennsylvania floods quite often. We can look back at times like Hurricane Ivan in 2004, and probably the most recent event that we had in May of 2019. And I'm going to talk about some of those things throughout the presentation. So if you would go to the next slide, please. So I guess the purpose of what I'm going to be trying to cover with you guys here this evening, I know this is a STEAM group, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And how does STEAM actually relate to water rescue? It's not that we're out there inventing the science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics component, but we're using the tools that folks like you in the future are actually going to create for us to make our jobs easier. And so I hope I'm going to be able to relate to the individuals that are on here to let them know that although you may not be directly involved in the rescue, like I would be as a rescue technician or another team member, the tools and technology that you create are what makes us safe and helps us to go home, and ultimately may rescue individuals in the future.
So how did you get involved into water rescue?
That's a great question. So if you want to go to the next slide, and I will try and show you how I got involved in water rescue here. So this is basically a chronology of my life, and it's all on one slide, but it kind of shows the evolution of where I came from and my background in water and how it led to water rescue. And hopefully I'm going to be able, again, to share some of that and maybe give you an idea why I'm so passionate about where I'm at. In the upper left-hand corner is a photo when I was with my parents. My parents owned a concession stand at Kettle Creek State Park, and they used to rent boats. Every summer I spent in the park. I consider myself a park rat. And basically I would spend my time in boats or swimming or fishing. And so I spent a great deal of time in my youth being around water. Probably the first time that water rescue ever really came to mind, if you look at the center picture at the top, is a photo of my mother and father receiving an award in April of 1984. We live in pretty much the middle of nowhere, and we had an individual drive up to our house and say that they heard screaming on the lake. This was at night, and that there was a boat that was capsized. My parents quickly drove to the park. My mother was actually a park employee. There was a boat there that was actually filled with water. They were unable to dump the water out of it, so my father and my mother rowed the boat approximately a quarter of a mile down the lake and rescued 2 adults and 2 children. And when you take a look at this, this was in April. Water is brutally cold. There were really no water rescue teams at that point. My parents received accolades for the heroism in which they demonstrated that evening. It was an extremely proud moment for me to know that my parents were instrumental in saving the lives of 4 individuals. So that was probably my first taste of water rescue. Then I move on through my college career. I got my associate's degree at Butler Community College, transferred to Slippery Rock, got my bachelor's and master's degree. And when I was done, I was hired by the National Park Service. And I worked on the Upper Delaware Scenic and Recreational River. And part of my job, we own 73 miles of river and 3 acres of land. So basically, every single weekend, I was on the river patrolling. My main patrol vehicle was a Shenandoah Hawksbill canoe, and you can see that as the middle picture on the far left. And every single weekend, I was out there assisting recreationalists who got themselves in trouble. The first time I got involved in water rescue instructor training was in 1988, and that's in the upper right-hand corner there. The interesting part about that is at the time, that was in late March, early April. The PPE, which is what I refer to as personal protective equipment that we wore during that time period, was nothing more than a wetsuit, almost a sweatshirt, and a nylon wind shell. Water was brutally cold. The equipment that I had really didn't provide a tremendous amount of protection. It gave me a real quick understanding of how powerful that water is and what it can do to you. So that was when I first got involved with water rescue instructor training. And in 1982, I took a group of students rafting down at Ohiopyle State Park. That's the center picture. And what you're seeing there is one of the rafts in our group in which it high-sided up on what's called Dimple Rock. For those on here that know anything about Ohiopyle, Dimple Rock has an undercut. That undercut is an opening in which people flush into and they don't come out. The student, when they high-sided on the rock, fell out of the raft didn't flip, the student didn't come up. I counted, I was in a kayak as a safety boat for about 15 seconds. Obviously my heart was going through my chest at that point because I knew where the individual was and what the hazard was at that point. Shortly thereafter, the student popped up. Gave me a quick understanding of how fast things can happen with water. Sometimes they're slow. In this, it was an instant. Another event that shaped my background, if you're looking on the far right, that's Tracy Wilson and Cole Wilson. Tracy had lost her husband, Scott Wilson, and there was another firefighter, Tony Murdoch, who were attempting a rescue/recovery on Slippery Rock Creek. Both of the rescuers drowned during that event. And so every time I go out and do training, especially when I'm out at McConnell's Mill State Park, I always think about Scott and Tony and the sacrifice that they gave. And I try to make sure that when I teach about water rescue, that I explain the risks and hazards associated with it. A couple other things that are there. In 2004, that was probably the biggest event that in my life reshaped my thoughts of water rescue, and that's when Hurricane Ivan roared into western Pennsylvania. The Connequenessing Creek during Hurricane Ivan rose to 16,700 cubic feet per second. Now, to put that in perspective, The normal amount of time that, or the normal water at this point is about 100 CFS. So the Connequenessing Creek in some places grew to almost a half-mile in width. Probably one of the scariest nights of my life. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. 2011, I was asked to be a part of the Pennsylvania Helicopter Aquatic Rescue Team. It was never on my bucket list of something that when I was growing up, I thought I would ever do. But based on my knowledge, skills, and abilities, and being involved with the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission and the lead water rescue instructor trainer, I was selected as one of the rescue technicians on the team. So since 2011, I've been part of that. And finally, water rescue never stops. We hope to try to mitigate and reduce that. But in 2020, this year, I was probably involved in one of the most extensive searches that I've had in my entire lifetime. And that was the search for the missing hiker on Slippery Rock Creek, which took approximately 60 days in which to find the gentleman. I'll talk about how we utilize technology to find him and to search for him.
The rescue sequence is an approach to water rescue tactics from simple to complex. The first person to rescue you is you. Self-rescue techniques involve your ability to reach safety should you end up in the water. Shore-based rescue consists of throwing and reaching techniques. The limits of these tactics are based upon distance and the victim's ability to be able to reach and grasp the device deployed. Examples include throw bags, extension devices like reach poles or paddles, and capturing techniques such as a tension diagonal net or a double-line floating tether system. Boat-based rescue allows technicians to reach distant locations, carry rescue assets and tools, transport personnel and victims, and provide stable platforms to work from in challenging conditions. They can be unpowered or powered boats, rescue boards, and sleds. Direct contact rescue involves technicians entering the water to rescue and/or recover a victim. The use of Type 5 water rescue vests for tethered swimmer rescue requires strong swimming skills, significant training, and practice. Direct contact can also include the use of public safety divers to reach submerged victims. Helicopter is the highest and most complex of the rescue sequence. Aerial platforms can transport personnel and assets when time, distance, and access is limited. Rescue technicians can also hoist to and extract victims using multiple rescue devices. The rescue sequence provides options to rescuers. Remember, keep it simple, train with all tactics, and have backup in place prior to engaging.
So how do you know when there's a water emergency?
That's a great question, Owen. If you kind of flip to the next slide. So what do we know? Well, we know that something's going on when a pager that we have usually sitting by our bed at night and during the day, it's a lot of times carried with us, buzzes and has a specific tone, and the dispatcher from the 911 communication center at Butler dispatches team 300. So we can be dispatched this way. We can also be dispatched this way, which is with the use of smartphones. So within Butler County, Team 300 is part of Active 911. So not only do tones go off on a pager, but we also get an alert on our phone. The one thing that's really cool about this part of the technology is not only does it give us the alert, but if the information has been provided accurately, it will have an address. It can pull up the map. It can show how many individuals are responding, and it gives us directions on how to get there, which is really, really amazing when you think about it. Also with the Pennsylvania Heart, this is also how I receive notifications of an incident. Butler County Team 300 is a team that's local within the county, and we typically work within Western Pennsylvania if we're requested for mutual aid. But on the other hand, Pennsylvania Heart covers the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And there are rescue technicians throughout the Commonwealth. And when we get an activation, we all have to go to a specific location. It's either in Johnstown or at Fort Indian Town Gap. The helicopters can also come to us. That is another option, depending on the circumstances. So what else do we know? Well, we know we're going to have these types of incidents, and I've done most of these during my career, and every time I go out, I always learn something new. So sometimes we have a single individual, and sometimes it's multiple. Flash flooding, you can have call after call after call after call. We can have individuals that are entrapped. They could drive across flooded roadways and be trapped in a vehicle, or they could be trapped inside of their house. And as the water rises in the house, they keep moving up and eventually get into the attic. The problem is with that is that once you're into the attic, how do you get out from there? So we need to have breaching tools to be able to do that. In some instances, the technology that we have to use is a boat, or it might be an aerial asset such as a helicopter. I don't know if you did anything this summer. Did you kayak, Owen?
I went kayaking once or twice this summer, yeah.
Nice. So let me ask, did you wear your life jacket? Putting you on the spot here. Say yes, Owen.
Went kayaking in a lake, yes.
Yep. All right.
We went kayaking on, I forget where it was. It was like a pretty shallow creek. I did not wear a jacket, but I had it within reach.
Had it within reach, okay. So here's what I want to tell you. 9 out of 10 drownings occur by individuals who don't wear a life jacket, all right? That doesn't mean that it's ultimately going to save you in every circumstance, but there is a very high probability. And normally people don't think that they're going to get themselves in trouble. And I can't tell you how many times that I've talked with individuals, family members, when I'm saying that I'm going to try and find their loved one. And if their loved one would have just worn a life jacket, sometimes that would have made the difference. So that's one of the things that we as rescue technicians are always wearing. And even when I'm out recreating myself with my family, I wear it as well. Just going on to kind of quickly get through this, because I know I've got a number of other slides. We also could be involved in rescuing animals during Hurricane Ivan and other large-scale events. It's not just rescuing people, but a lot of times we have to manage pets. That could be everything from dogs and cats to even birds, things like that. We can engage in flat moving water, swift water, flash flooding, and in our area we have ice. And the scary part about ice is that it's sometimes solid and sometimes not. And it changes radically and fast based on weather conditions. So if you would go to the next slide. You can also deal with tidal issues, mud, industry, hazmat. I just want to kind of briefly talk about that here for a second. One of the things that when I first started in water rescue, I wore was a wetsuit. I no longer wear that. I wear a dry suit. And a dry suit basically encapsulates me. It allows moisture from my body to wick out, but it protects me from the water and the wind. It doesn't keep me warm. But one of the great things that it also does is that when we're engaged in flash flooding, we have hazardous materials that are in the water. So basically, if you think of any chemical plant, what's in your garage, what's in your basement, any of those things, there's chemicals. And so the technology of the PPE that we wear today is very, very important because it keeps us from being exposed from everything from sewage, petroleum, oil, gas, chemicals, you name it. And again, it's very high-tech equipment. We also need to be aware that water rescue is sometimes a criminal incident. Is the individual missing because of an accident, or could it be because of a criminal type of a situation? So every time I respond to that, I always keep that in mind. And be aware that homeland security and weapons of mass destructions are also things that we as water rescue technicians really think about. If you think of incidents such as, or a situation such as a large sporting event that occurs down in Pittsburgh, well, believe it or not, there's divers in place that are ready to respond in the Three Rivers area. Or maybe there's other things that are going on behind the scenes that are there to keep the citizens safe. So there's all kinds of things that we can respond to. So if you go to the next slide, please. So what we don't know, go ahead, next one. And click. So some of the things that we don't know is what we're going to be dealing with when we get there. This was during Hurricane Sandy. And during Hurricane Sandy, this was out in the eastern part of Pennsylvania. One of the fire departments that were transporting our local asset around decided that they needed to get the vehicle turned around, and they drove off the road. As soon as they did that, the vehicle sunk. And at that point, this vehicle was no longer operational. So for us sometimes to get from point A to point B can be very challenging. Remember, we're out there when everybody else is trying to go home. So if it's a hurricane and it's windy and stormy out and you're safe in your home, we're the ones that are out there engaged trying to get to individuals who might be trapped. Go ahead, next. Even for us on the helicopter team, just landing one of our air assets, whether it be a UH-60 Blackhawk or a Chinook, we are even concerned about where we're putting our air assets down. Not only could the ground be completely saturated, but when you're underneath the rotor wash of a UH-60, the air pressure or the airspeed that's coming off of that thing is approximately 90 miles an hour. That will blow trees over, branches off of trees. It'll lift roofs. So we're dealing with all kinds of things. Go ahead, next. Cold conditions. Those are some of the real challenges that we're out there. Again, the equipment that we have, you're seeing me wearing a dry suit, life jacket, goggles, and I'm completely iced up, and so is the boat. But people go out on these types of days. Think about hunters that might be out there. We have to have the equipment and the technology to be able to get to them. Next. Helicopters, they allow us to get from point A to point B rapidly. We have 3 platforms that we use. What you're seeing here in the black background is a UH-60 Blackhawk. That will travel approximately 222 miles an hour. Our CH-47, that'll travel approximately 188 miles an hour. And then we use a UH-72 Lakota, and that platform travels about 167 miles an hour. That's our eye in the sky when we're all out and operational in a large-scale flash flooding incident. Next. And be aware, things change rapidly. This is on the same exact day. This was a search that we were doing out of Moraine State Park for a missing individual. This was mid-afternoon. Next. And this is what it was like when we came in. Things change rapidly, and we have to be prepared to be able to be out there. And just think, if we're out in this kind of environment, and you no longer can find the shoreline, how do you get back from point A to point B? And that's where things like just a simple GPS unit can help us get from point A to point B. Or even when I'm using my smartphone, I can pull up a map, I can see where I'm at, and it can actually track me as I'm traveling in the boat. So this technology that you or others that are on here that are going to continue to develop and evolve are going to be things that I use to keep myself safe and to get myself back to safety. Next. And it's kind of funny. Normally, most water rescues don't happen in the perfect weather conditions. Most of them happen at night in horrible conditions. And so we have to have lights to be able to see. And also we utilize night vision. Next. So Owen, just real quick, let's say you're the first person on the scene here. What are some of the things that you see that could be a hazard?
Some of the things that stick out at first are the parking signs. You could, correct, if the water starts flowing, you could run into those.
Absolutely.
Also, what looks like fences around electrical stuff.
Great.
That looks dangerous. And there's also some kind of, in the back left, what looks like a roped off area that could be something like they were digging there.
Okay, so it looks like police. Yeah, so you've definitely picked up some interesting things there, and you're absolutely correct. One of the things you see here is a lot of handicap signs. So my question is there a nursing home nearby where you need that amount of parking spaces? So that's a possibility. I've got the electrical area. I have the guide wires that's coming down, but it's what you don't see. Next time you drive down the street, take a look at the street. A lot of times they have manhole covers. When the water comes up, it blows the cover off of the manhole, and now it becomes a trap for rescue personnel. So if you were looking here and you saw a small whirlpool, that's actually something that's drawing water down in. Next. Good job, Owen. And what do we don't know? Go ahead, hit the next slide. Is what we're going to get into, especially when it's a large-scale incident. This was down in Texas. I just pulled a few images off. You see the general public here trying to help as much as possible, but they don't have the appropriate PPE. They could be in hazardous materials. There's no life jackets. The coordination. People are doing the best that they can, but having trained water rescue personnel to help coordinate and do the rescues are what we're really looking at.
So how does technology play into water rescue operations and tactics?
That's a great question. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to just briefly talk about some of the things that we use. So this summer, for the search out at McConnell's Mills, probably used the most amount of technology when it comes to drones to look for the missing hiker. We had multiple drones that we used, and in swift water, it's a lot more challenging to go out and do a detailed search. Drones can hover over an area. Some of them have the capability to identify heat signatures. They have high-tech cameras on them. They're connected to screens in which we can see. We can fly them out to, let's say, for example, a vehicle, quickly circle around them and see if there's even anyone in there. If you're looking on the right-hand side, you're going to see what looks like a sunset picture. And what that is that's a side scan sonar image. And one of the things that I really don't want to do in water rescue is to get in the water because that's the most hazardous point. And if we're trying to recover someone, let's say someone's missing out at Moraine State Park, that's 3,000 acres of lake. How do you actually find that individual? So we try to get as close of an idea from witnesses of where they are, but we use side scan sonar. And what that does is it sends a signal down to the bottom and it reflects back up. It appears on a screen. And when you're looking at that, when you're looking at the screen, you can determine potentially if it's a body that's under the water. You can then GPS it. You can come back and mark it. You put divers in the water, they go down, and the body is there. It really enhances our safety. The individual in green, he's using NVGs. I said, when we're operating at night, boy, we really are limited on what we can see. I'll tell you, I also use my smartphone. I'll pull up Google Earth and take a look at that, and that can give me an idea of what the terrain and everything is like before I actually engage, because I can't see everything, but I can pull that up. So I'll use a smartphone or I'll keep a tablet with me. Other things that I'll carry, this is my heart radio. This is waterproof. It actually goes inside of my life jacket, and I wear phones like this that'll have a mic that'll come in. I can swim with this thing, and I can communicate with the helicopter and my other rescue technicians. This will allow me to talk anywhere in Pennsylvania. I can contact a comm center. So there's all kinds of things that I can do with this. And finally, as I said, the GPS. So those are some of the things that you and other individuals that are involved in STEAM are going to create and work to enhance that technology to help me as a rescue technician. So when I'm out there, we're going to be safer and hopefully be able to rescue the individual. Okay, next. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about HART. In 2011, Pennsylvania HART became operational, and basically it is a joint venture between Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, who provides the rescue technicians, the Pennsylvania Army National Guard, and PEMA. And basically, we are an air asset that is hoist capable, and we can also move assets across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. What we have is a helicopter, a crew. We go out and engage in environments that are normally extremely dangerous because if we're called, nothing else worked. And then we still also have to have the ability to communicate. Communications is always the Achilles heel of every rescue op. Go ahead and hit the next one.
On June 27, 2019, the Pennsylvania Helicopter Aquatic Rescue Team conducted the Hurricane Jessica exercise at Butler County Community College in Butler, Pennsylvania. This large-scale exercise prepares the team for real-world rescues.
So what this is, Owen, this is the Pennsylvania Helicopter Aquatic Rescue Team. This is an iteration that I coordinated at our public safety complex at BC3. And one of the reasons we use BC3 is because it provides such an outstanding area to train. What you're looking at here is a climbing tower and one of our rescue technicians that are hoisting out of the UH-60. And you can see they've got to literally thread the needle. They're dropping them into a very tight location. Kim was placing what's called a rescue strap around the victim. And once they are double checked by the safety on the roof, the thumbs up are given by the safety personnel and they're hoisted. This is me being moved. So it kind of gives you what it's like to be a rescue technician, that bird's eye view. And when you look at this, this was a very complex iteration. We were operating 3 UH-60 Blackhawks and a CH-47, and that's what you're looking at there. That CH-47 is kind of like a Greyhound bus. It can move a ton of assets, but it's not real maneuverable. It gets the job done if necessary. So our rescue technicians are working with both of the platforms. I think during this iteration, when I go back and look at my notes here, we did over 52 rescue technicians hoist during this training iteration. And be aware, every rescue tech has to be checked off annually on skills to be able to still be part of the team. And again, there you can see 52 rescue technician hoists, 14 skeds. And the sked is what we use for moving patients that are unconscious. And take a look at that image there. That's the amount of people that were involved in the running of this iteration. The majority of those folks are all volunteers. So I want everybody here to realize that, okay?
Okay, so what does it take to be involved in water rescue?
Okay, if you would go to the next slide. What I like to tell people is if you're involved in water rescue, it's crawl, walk, run. Water rescue is not for everyone. It is a tactical, specialized skill set. I have great admiration for firefighters that want to go into a burning building. Not my idea of a good time. But I have a lot of other people that are firefighters that don't want to have anything to do with water. So each of us in our own specialty provide a resource to our community. So what I like to tell people, if you're going to get involved in this, we do what we call as a crawl, walk, run. Crawl means that you have to go through the basic level training. So all of the people that are our rescue technicians, they take an awareness level course, which is 3.5 hours. They take an operations course, which is 16 hours. A boat ops class, 16 hours. ICE class, 16 hours. Advanced line systems rescue class, 16 hours. That's just to get the basic level training. That's what I call the crawl stage. The walk stage is then when you get involved in a team and you start going to trainings and iterations to hone and practice your skills. The last video that you saw, the Hurricane Jessica exercise, that's a run video, all right? The rescue technicians, they had to make decisions on the fly. And they were going from one point to the next point to the next point. And they had to deal and manage with a whole variety of different challenges that were put in front of them. The importance is to give them the most training to prepare them to engage when the real thing happens. So if you want to go to the next slide. So Owen, I think I've covered most of the content in the amount of time that you ask. I think we're at about 40 minutes into this. And so I'm hoping that this kind of gives you an idea of water rescue and the tactical and operational things that we do out there, and how STEAM, the science, the technology, the engineering, the arts, and the mathematics plays an integral role in that whole process.
Yeah, so thank you for that great presentation.
Welcome.
So now we're going to move into questions and answers. So
Okay.
First question is, what is your favorite thing about your job?
I think my favorite thing about my job is that it's never the same thing twice. So the one thing that I would like everybody that's on here to know is that you need to be learning every single day. And if you think about that slide that I talked about, my evolution, I started out in a rowboat and I've ended up in a helicopter, right? So that's pretty diverse. And every time I go out, I learn something new. And I train not only within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but I'm also part of the International Association of Water Rescue Professionals. In the first video, you saw some of the cool things that we do out in South Bend, Indiana. The gentleman that was in a vehicle, that vehicle was staged in a race in which we control the water. We raise the water to a specific level, and rescue technicians then train to go get that guy. That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. That gives them more experience than they've ever gotten normally in almost any other training. So that's the thing that I like most about my job, how it continues to evolve.
Yeah, awesome. So next question is, what does kind of a average day look like for you? I know it's different each time, but
yeah. So my hat rotates. I have two jobs. My full-time job is I'm a college professor at Butler County Community College, and I coordinate the Park and Recreation Management program there. I've been doing that since 1984, so it's been a good ride, and I still enjoy the things that I do there. COVID has drastically changed the things that I do, in which I've had to transition to do more of things like this. This is a new skill set. I don't look at this as a disadvantage. I'm looking at this as wow, I get the opportunity to share my information maybe with, if we would have done this normally, it might have been a small group, but now this might reach a whole lot of different people. So I'm a college professor. I volunteer with Team 300. I also work with the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. I'm the lead water rescue instructor trainer for that organization. So for them, I coordinate all of the water rescue trainings in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And when I say trainings, I'm talking about train the trainer. So if you, Owen, would go through all the trainings and then you go, this is really cool, I would like to become an instructor to do some of the things that you're doing, well, then you would come back and I'm now going to teach you how to teach the curriculum. And then with Pennsylvania Heart, that again has just been an evolution. The first time I hoisted, I think I was pretty nervous, but now I'm pretty comfortable. I never anticipated being a guy that hangs from the bottom of a UH-60 Blackhawk. That doesn't seem normal, but it's, again, part of the evolution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another question, a little bit more robotics related. Mm-hmm. So how do you think robotics and STEM could be used to improve water rescue?
I can easily answer that one, all right? So one of the things that's on the evolution right now for robotics is underwater drones, okay? So the ability for me to use a drone to see what it's projecting onto my screen and then to track it so I know that I'm covering a geographic area. That's huge. All right. So underwater drones, I think, are things that I hope in the future continue to evolve. Now, the aerial platforms, they're just going more and more in depth in terms of the things in which they can do with heat-seeking information on them, high-tech cameras, the ability to fly them over great distances. I know water rescue teams that actually use those. When there's an incident on the river, they can go to an access, launch a drone, fly multiple miles of the river, bring the drone back and drive to the next access and do the entire river much faster than they can by deploying individuals on the river. Once they find them, they go to the nearest access and then they do the rescue. So for the robotics part, I think that's huge. The other thing, when it comes back to those robotics for the underwater things, I would like to see, and I know it's out there, but this is stuff that you guys can really think about, is the ability, if I have somebody that I need to capture under the water, is the ability to hook that individual and have them secured, and then that robot propulsion brings them back up. Then that keeps our people safe. We don't have to engage in the hostile environment.
Yeah. Yeah. So next question is, could you tell us a little bit more about your Butler Community College program?
Sure. I teach the Park and Recreation Management program, and we have two options. The first option is the general option, and that's one that maybe you might want to be a park naturalist. That's the individual that gives guided hikes or tours in a park, has a background in environmental education, and shares their knowledge about the park itself. It can, in the future, lead you into maybe being a park manager where you're running the park. I also teach adventure education. So if you've gone to Ohiopyle State Park or the New River Gorge or the Gully, there's rafting companies and things like that. Guides transport people down the river. And so they have to be highly trained to understand not only the water dynamics, but how to move the boats, but if something goes wrong, how to rescue individuals. Plus, they have to be great communicators. They have to know how to plan things. So you could be a guide. We also have a law enforcement option. So you may or may not know, but within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a number of park rangers carry weapons. They are Act 120 certified. They're basically municipal police officers working in a conservation area. So if you'd be interested in law enforcement with like the Bureau of State Parks or the Game Commission or the Fish Commission, where they have officers that have that capability, we give you that basic level training.
Awesome. So next question is, how has the technology, and I know you covered this a little bit, but how has it changed and evolved over your search and rescue career?
PPE is probably what I would say is the greatest thing. If I'm cold, I'm not operational. I'm an individual that gets cold very rapidly, and I'm kind of like the kid from A Christmas Story. I don't know if you've watched that, the one that falls over and can't get up because they've got all the clothes on. That's me. Wearing a wetsuit into April water, not so much fun. On the other hand, if I've got a high-tech dry suit that allows the moisture from my body to be transported out, all right, I can use polypropylene to wick moisture away from my body. I can have polyester to give me insulation. The gloves that I wear on my hands actually have polyester and titanium flakes in them. So when I'm going to an emergency in the winter, I actually place those water rescue gloves on the heater that heats the titanium flakes up and keeps my hands even warmer. This right here, communications, all right? Who knew that I could wear a radio with comms and the ability to be able to communicate, and I can swim with it, all right? This is pretty amazing. That communication aspect is huge from a person who You know, we think about using this all the time. Back during Hurricane Ivan and things like that, this stuff wasn't like it is today. So just even this, I'll go to a scene and I'll interview, let's say, an individual who witnessed someone go under the water. I'll actually interview them and I'll capture all that information here so I have it for future reference. Then I'm going to walk with them. I'm going to stand right behind them and I'm going to say, can you show me exactly where you saw that person for the last time? And I'll stand behind them and I'll capture that. Then later on, when I'm doing my tactical planning, I'll incorporate that into how I'm going to search my areas. So this is a video camera. This gives me my weather. It's got a GPS in it. I can text. I can pull up water levels. I can see how fast the water's rising. It's amazing, but it fails. So we have to, I want to point this out, all of us who are rescue technicians need to realize this fails. This fails. This fails, okay? In the end, the only thing that we have to rely on are our knowledge, skills, and abilities, all right? If you think you're going to rely on technology to make everything perfect, it's not going to happen, all right? There's the human element that's invested in this. And Owen, what I would like you to do, if this is something that you want to do in the future, if you're making something for me as a water rescue technician, don't assume you know what you're talking about. Go and work with the water rescue technician and see what we're doing. The more you know about what our needs are, the better product you're going to be able to make in the future, you know, when you're in that robotics lab and you're creating this, because you're going to say, hey, I remember when I was out there, I saw this. This is a weakness.
Yeah. Okay, so how can students get involved in search and rescue, kind of going off of that last student?
So I know you're from Mars. So you could go to your local fire department. And this is just in general. Every community has a fire department. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, almost every single fire department is volunteer. Very few are paid, all right? So when somebody shows up to your house to put a fire out or to rescue you when there's an automobile accident, 9 chances out of 10, they just left their family. They're not paid to do that. So one of the things that I would encourage everyone on here is to do community service. So maybe if fire rescue is not your thing, but comms is, then be a part of the communication asset. If you, in the STEAM part, it says arts. Maybe you could go in with the arts part and do social media and promote the things that the local fire department is doing. Taking photos. Maybe you can actually go and volunteer. And I think one of the things that you'll find, Owen, is that these fire departments use a lot of the technology that you guys create to make themselves safer, you know? So do your community service. It'll make you a better person, and the stuff that you create may actually come from that volunteer experience that you get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for that, how young can a student be to start getting involved with that?
I think you would have to contact each of your individual departments. Normally they have a juniors program. I can tell you from the water rescue side, you cannot take any of the water rescue trainings offered by the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission until you are 18. You have to be 18, all right? In the fire departments, they do have junior programs, and there are restrictions on what you can do. But everybody starts at a low level. The more you know from the bottom up, the better you're going to become. Remember the one slide that I said, crawl, walk, run? Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm in the run stage, but it's taken me many years to get here. And all of you on here, especially if you're in school, and Owen, I think you said you're in 10th grade, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So you got 2 more years of high school, and maybe 4 years of university, and who knows, you might be a PhD. I don't know. That's 8 years, right? Before you're even out there in the workplace. That's when you're done with high school, crawl's done, you're going to the walk. And then when you get in the workplace, then you start into the run, but it's going to take you a while to get to that level. So start early.
Yeah. So one more question
Sure.
before the last one. So what's the hardest situation you've ever been in?
I guess I'll say Hurricane Ivan. We were going to multiple calls, and we were on the Connequenessing Creek. We were on River Left, and as soon as we made our rescues there, all of a sudden, everybody took off. I wasn't a part of a fire department. It's a long story, but I was involved that evening. I followed with my trailer from the college and our assets, and we went down to the Connequenessing on the opposite side of the river, and there was an individual there, and he said he's tried high band, low band, and all forms of communication to reach the 3 individuals who had gone out into the Connequenessing to attempt to get an individual out of a house, and he has not been able to get them. At this point, we knew we had 3 firefighters that were missing on the Connequenessing Creek. We launched our paddle boat, not a motorboat, but our paddle boat, and we paddled our raft. And to make a long story short, we were able to locate the chief. They had capsized their boat. They caught that guide wire. Remember when I showed you that picture and said, what do you see? Their boat caught the guide wire and it flipped them. Mm-hmm. It broke the utility pole in half. And when the chief came up, he grabbed a hold of the utility line and it zip-lined him to the upstream side of a utility pole. And that's where he was. We got to him, but we couldn't reach him. And so the only way we could get him is we threw him a rope and pulled him across the swift current. He didn't know where the other 2 individuals were that were in his boat. We got him back to shore and he got transported out, and we found the other 2 individuals and we rescued them as well. That was by far the most intense rescue that I've ever been involved in. 2 years later, I met the chief as I was taking my students canoeing up in Emlenton, and he had his grandchild with him. It was a pretty emotional reunion, because that's the first time I saw him since that night. And to see him with his grandchild, that was pretty special.
Yeah.
So that's the most intense night of my life.
Yeah. So final question.
Sure.
So what's the best advice that you've ever received throughout your career?
Okay, I'm going to give you 2, all right? Because I think there's a couple of things. Tell me I forget, teach me I remember, involve me I learn. So when you're involved in your education, it's not just about listening to the lectures from the professors or the teachers, but the ones that do the best are the ones that actually get you engaged. You're doing some really cool things here. You're interviewing a subject matter expert. You're doing a streaming broadcast. You're going to remember this. This is really cool. All right. And kudos to all in the Mars Robotics program for all that you're doing for the youth in your community. So that's my first information. The next one is the one that I always think about every time I do a training. And it goes something like this. Let no man's ghost return saying his training let him down. So what that means is that every time you're involved in any type of training, you want to train as if it's real, because the next time it absolutely will. If you didn't put 100% of an effort in, that may mean the difference between you coming home or somebody going to your house and telling your loved one that you didn't make it. So, and those are my 2 pieces of advice.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us tonight and sharing all of this with us. was very informative. So thank you also to everyone who's been watching. So we'll kind of exit you now. And
Okay.
yeah, so see you.
Oh, and I appreciate everything that you guys have done here this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to share the information, and you guys keep doing what you're doing. You're doing outstanding, and thank you for the things that you're doing in the community. And Owen, I can't wait to see what you create for me to use in the future.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming tonight.
Sure.
So for all of you still watching, so next month, join us on the 18th for a Christmas special featuring a red cloaked guest and some insight on how Christmas happens each year. Hope to see you then. The Mars Robotics Speaker Series is a production of the students of the Mars Robotics Association. Mars Robotics is a part of the First Robotics, with teams competing in First LEGO League and First Technical Challenge. For more information about the Mars Robotics Association and Mars Robotics Speaker Series, or any of our other programs, please visit us at www.marsroboticsassociation.org. Thank you for watching.